You working with John, right?
Huh?
You're working with John? Yeah. I'm trying to convince him to come to the Fall Classic. I've been working on it for probably 6 years.
We have such a strain on our parents. We'll talk about it tonight, but we're asked so much of our parents right now that
Flying.
it's just so much money.
Yep. I know.
It's just, I mean, and I'm not saying no, but we should talk about it. But man, it's a lot.
Yep. Well, maybe I can help with the hotels.
But you're
or
hustling right now.
Yep.
And you're getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. Frankie,
Yeah. Well, it's important though. That's
I get it, but Frankie, the reason that you're sitting here, getting inducted into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, is because of that hustle that you are literally exhibiting as I turn the camera on.
That's it. That is important. I figured I was going through writing some stuff down, and I'm like, what am I going to talk about? The speech, and I started thinking, like, what do I bring to the table? Really, what did I bring to the table? And in the end, I started thinking about the 10,000 hour rule. And I started doing the math, and I think I had like 120,000 hours. But they say 10,000, you've mastered something. So what did I master? I can't even hit a single leg that well. Pale in comparison, guys like you. And what really did I bring to the table? And I'm just able to chase and convince. That's it. I mastered chasing and convincing, and that's what it comes down to. That's it.
Is that how it started? Meaning.
No.
Is that how the journey?
The journey started by being a kid that was bullied, right, and felt like I couldn't protect myself, stuff like that. And then wrestling gave me that platform, confidence. And then once you start getting that, you get bit by it, to start believing in yourself and believing in it. And it worked. It changed my mentality, or it helped build. It helped build what I was, or inside of me, helped build it up. And then from there, you start. It's incremental, right? You're able to do this. Well, if I'm able to do this, can I do that? And then we did that. Can we do this? And it starts moving in that direction. And then you start chasing and convincing. Can't do it alone, right?
No.
Right.
Everyone that sat in that chair today has said the same thing. You can't do it alone, and that's fine. But every ship needs a captain. And so let me ask you this: you wear a lot of different hats. How would you describe what you do? So you and I meet at a bar. You've never spoken to me before in my life. How would you tell me what you do for a living?
Did you talk to my wife? I would say I'm an ambassador to wrestling, right? I promote wrestling, but I had, the canned version was, I had 4 C's that I believed in, which were camp, clinics, club, and competition. And I took those 4 C's and I built each of those divisions in a real solid way. And that helped form what I do. But the deeper answer is you help build people, right? All of it, for me, the most important element was on the club side, building people to believe in themselves. Exactly what happened to me when I was in 7th grade, right? That was the part that I identify tightest with. The other parts are important, don't get me wrong, but building people is what this is all about.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. But what part of those 4 C's? Because that's kind of the way I looked at. It's really difficult to just do one of those 4 C's and have a good life and provide for your family. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Which of those 4 C's do you enjoy the most?
I like the tournaments. I have the competitions. I have a deep, deep passion for international. Part of it is it's not a lucrative part. It's a donation. So, but I'm drawn to the camaraderie, the unified language of wrestling, and you can go anywhere in the world, and people take you in, and vice versa. And I've really grown to love that part of it. And so for me, the competition parts are the things I like the best. I like providing platforms that are kind of unique, different, bringing the best to come in, guys that are on the cusp, then they break out and people get to see them. I like it. I like that part of it.
So that makes you sadistic, because Frankie, I've known you for a long time.
Way back.
You run yourself ragged
Yep.
at these events, leading up to, during, and even after, while you're rolling up mats.
Yep, the perfect depiction. I burn it hard, probably to a point where it's taxing, just physically
You can say
unhealthy. Yep, unbalanced, workaholic, and yeah, that's true. That's not a lie, but the reward, those peaks and valleys, I love it. Maybe it's a high, call it a high of, and I always, I like to do something a little different each time in the hopes of expanding or evolving, right? I like to evolve. I don't like to do it over and over and over the same thing. I like to try to make it a little bit different while solidifying the brand, of the event we're doing.
Okay, so let's just talk about the competition space.
Yeah.
How has, because you've been at that for a bit too, man, how has that changed over the last 20 years?
Well, it is changing as we speak.
Right.
It can be too tip of the spear. Sometimes you're rolling with just the highest of the high, and then you leave out the base of the triangle, which is you can't forget. You can't forget that. You have to have something there too to help guys build to get to the tip. But it's a harder game now, where guys are a little bit more. I would say they've pulled back. They don't. The tip of the spear guys don't necessarily want to compete as much, and they compete in very specific things. And you have to work hard to get them to see value in coming to you, or what your platform will do for them.
Was that not always the case, you think?
There was a time where, I'm going to throw some names out, where we have Yanni, Vito, Piccinini, Rashid. Like, there were guys that would wrestle every weekend, and it would be, let's do who's number one, and then the following weekend we're gonna wrestle at your place. I think, like, we had guys like Manville versus Hidley, and they would do it back to back to back weeks. They didn't care. They weren't necessarily worried about ramifications of losing and how that would impact ranking. They were in it for the overall development and the overall benefit
You
of.
don't see that as much now?
Not in the same capacity. I'm sure those guys are there, but the volume has diminished a little bit. There's a little bit of concern, I think, on the ranking front, that they could lose value if they take a loss. However, I would argue otherwise. I don't think it's changed. I don't think the coaches, the college coaches care. They're looking for your ability to perform over a period of time and be consistently decent. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to win every single one. After time, they know who the winners are, and so that's my perspective on it.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong.
It's different. I'm just telling you,
Yeah, no,
it's different now.
It's measurably different.
Yes. Now, that doesn't mean we're not sold out of competitors that want to put it on the line.
Sure.
And do it and become the ranked guys, or they're ranked guys already. But I'm talking about that real tip of the spear. It's just adjusted a little bit.
Who's the best wrestler to come to your events that maybe isn't a veto? Nobody's heard of. What was a time where you looked, because you do put together that tip, like, so I love your events because we get to see, you say tip of the spear, I say boiled down, concentrated talent.
Yeah, meat and potatoes.
Yeah, like there's no fluff.
But I know you don't want me to say this because you just prefaced it, but the biggest mistake I ever made was judging Yanni Yakmahalis. His mom had called when he was in 7th grade and said, hey, we want to get into your Journeyman Classic, the Fall Classic. And I said, okay, great, what are his accolades? And they said, well, nothing on varsity because he's in 7th grade. And so we started this process of arguing and debating. And the harder she pushed, the harder I doubled down. And I drew a line. I'm like, I'm not letting this guy in. And then she pushed even harder. And then Mr. Yakmahalis got involved and he started calling. And I had no idea who anybody was at that point. I was totally ignorant. And so then I finally relented and said, okay, we're gonna let him in. And then they called me again and said, we want to be in the top bracket. Because of the way it's formatted, there were an A bracket or a B bracket. And I'm like, he's definitely in the B bracket. I mean, he's a 7th grader with no experience at the varsity level. And they fought again, and we went back and forth. And I don't even know how they still talk to me to this day. Because I was so wrong. I couldn't be any more wrong. Anyway, we get him in after I had people left and right were like, yeah, you got this one wrong. So we let him in, top bracket. He teched or pinned every single guy in the weight. Again, we had national place finishers that he had his way with. I was so wrong, it was incredible. So that left an indelible mark.
Yeah, when you're that wrong. And it doesn't happen often. I know you won't say it, but I'll say it. You're pretty spot on with those.
I try to lean on. I may even call a guy like yourself.
Right.
If we get a guy coming in from an area that I'm not as familiar with or don't get to see him as much, and I'll lean on people to say, what do you know? What do I need to know? What am I missing? I'm thinking this right now. Do I need to? And I take a lot of pride in getting it right. And every year we screw up. I screwed up 2 years ago with Catrabone. He was late into the game, and we only let him into the overflow, and he won the overflow, and then we put him in the B bracket, and he ended up being nationally ranked that year. And yeah, they weren't happy, but in the end, I learned from it. Every time that you make a mistake, you get better and you learn, you evolve, or else you don't survive to see tomorrow.
What area of what you do, the 4 C's as you put it, do you find the most growth consistent?
Growth?
Yeah. So where do you make, because I know the coaching aspect of it for me, I suck. Every day I think that I can get so much better.
All of it. I mean, I do camps with guys like Brands, Smith, Sanderson, right? Even my brother. And each of them has a different system, and you immerse yourself into their system as you partner, right? And you can't stop learning. I'm not even talking the technical side.
No.
I'm talking about how to run things and what their demeanor is, their philosophy comes through, and how you're running a camp. Something as simple as Kale and his crew, Casey and Cody, when they're doing camps, they're at every single session of every single day. That's that's something that isn't typical, right? And you see how they do it, and then they have a unique format where they'll have 3 groups, and people are allowed to pick whatever group that they want to be a part of. So over here, maybe Varner teaching, over there's Cody Sanderson, and on the other side, maybe Max Dean. And you can rotate as you feel you want to. The next session, you can go to the same session again if you want to get more out of Max Dean. Just a different perspective. And so I've learned to not be so single-minded in certain ways. Rigid. Like, this is how we're doing it. This is how, and you're constantly listening and evolving. I pride myself, at least, to try to be open-minded in that capacity and balance. You got to have some element of structure, or else you're floating all over the place.
No, that goes without saying for sure. But who are you? You're throwing out big names that you've personally learned from.
Yep.
Right. Which of the, and maybe not a big name, who was the person you were surprised by? Like, man, I had no idea he was like this, or I had no idea he would do things this way.
Surprised by? You got guys like Mitch Clark, right? I'll throw a name. He's a New York guy, national champ, only guy ever to tech fall his opponent in the national finals in the first period, right? People may forget that. But when he comes in and does a clinic, it's spectacular. Yeah. Like, he's off the chart, and he's been out of the game for decades, right? Like, I mean, what's it, 20 years maybe now? Somewhere in there, 15 years. And so you would think he's irrelevant, that kind of. It's awesome, right? And that's something that, maybe guys wouldn't like. He's a national champ, and there's a lot of them, and maybe people wouldn't give him a platform. Like, for me, right? I bring him in, and to this day, I bring him in every year. I think he does that good of a job, but that's a guy that kind of, I was taken aback by how good he can teach. It's not necessarily, what's being taught per se, but how he teaches, how he breaks it down, does a very good job.
Yeah, Tom Ryan's still bringing him in the room. What does that say, right? Like, it's fun to watch. He's incredible.
Yep.
Let's get back to you. What do you wear these different hats, and you affect so many different parts of the sport. What do you want your legacy to be in this sport?
That's a good question.
It's almost like I'm good at this.
You're good at this. You're really good at this. They brought the right guy in. Legacy, I'd like to, it goes back to coaching, where really is where my start happened. I created a club, and I like the idea that 20-something years later, and people come back and they say, thank you, or you helped me. My darkest and hardest days were in that room, and it afforded me the mentality I needed to be a Navy SEAL or a Green Beret. That kind of stuff I take a lot of pride in, and I value it, and that's where, as I moved through all these different phases, I've tried to maintain the coaching element with keeping in mind that, you got to be all in, as you know. If you're not all in, then you're doing a disservice to the athlete. You got to give them everything. You got to be selfless. And so, as I've aged, I've just now taken a step back and have brought other people in to fill that void. But I can't walk away from it.
Completely.
I can't. It's actually a sickness.
I tried.
Yep, I can't do it. And it's got nothing to do with being world team members or national team members.
My greatest accomplishments, you'll never know their names.
That's what I'm talking about.
You'll never know their names.
Guy that's maybe suffering for some kind of disability, and we get him to make the, make the varsity team. That kind of stuff. Yeah.
So you're learning, even still, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you have to, I always want to learn more. I want to be around. I still, to this day, try to pick the brains of John Smith, anybody that's a leader in our game, whether it's a guy like yourself leading the way in the area that you're in. I like to be around it. I like to be around greatness, and I'd like to just be able to evolve constantly. I'm always looking at, like, how can we be better? How can we be the best at whatever we're doing or wherever we're focused on? And it's hard. It's not easy.
Yeah, way hard, right? Because mediocrity is easy. But okay, if you could go back in a time machine and talk to yourself 20 years ago, what advice would you give?
Relax. Relax. I've had a couple. I've had a couple interventions with people that have sat me down and like, dude, you're out of control. You're too tight. You're too. But it's easy to look back in hindsight, and I was just worried about not messing up. I told you in the beginning that the thing I could bring to the table best is that I chase and convince people. So the moment you get Cale Sanderson, Tom Brands, John Smith, Jay Robinson, Tom Ryan to say the word yes, Dan Gable, yes, I'm in. You can't screw up. You can't trip. You can't stumble. And when you do an event, when you do produce something, there's always bombs that go off. Always. It's not the idea. The idea is easy. And then you have to actually materialize and facilitate. And the bomb will go off. Hey, we got a Russian training camp. We got Russia coming. And I'm sitting eating dinner, and 3 weeks before, Russia calls and says, we're out. What do? You got the whole United States coming. You got a dual meet set up. What do you do? Right? You got to figure it out fast. You start calling other countries, and you got to fill the void. You got to have a united, a world team. You're getting people from all over the world to be better than Russia. You got to be better. You have to take the nightmare and flip it. So I look back, and I was so stressed out all the time. I was tight that now I've got 30 years experience in being able to deal with the bombs. And so I'm a little bit more relaxed going in, knowing that in the end it's like a wedding, right? Where you plan every detail, and everyone's so uptight to all those details. But in the end, no matter what happens, there's still a wedding, there's still a party, there's still a ceremony, and people don't actually really see the implosions. They don't. They just remember the good. Internally you do. But to the average person, they don't even know there was a nightmare. They don't. And so I've been able to, I think I'd look back and say, relax. Enjoy the actual moment that you have Iowa and Oklahoma State and Missouri wrestling in the same gym on the same day. You enjoy it. Watch the match. Watch the matches.
We forget to watch the matches.
I don't even watch the matches. You're going to ask me who won here, who did that. I don't know. I didn't see it. I'm worrying about if the timer is off by a fraction of a second. But I've learned.
That's what makes you great.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. I've learned from my wife. My wife has been like, time out, go up top, hibernate, and get lost and watch. And I've done that now.
Good. All right, I'm running out of time with you. Quickly. And this is not going to be easy. Quickly. Who's on the Mount Rushmore?
Oh, gosh. In what capacity? For me? For me?
I'm literally
Okay, so here you go. John Smith, for me, was the guy that's the technical wizard. Brands, Terry, mentality. Jay Robinson, marketing. Sanderson, humility and demeanor. Those are my guys, and I have them in different capacities. So
That's amazing. That was a great one. All right, last one. Try this one's. You can put a little thought into this if you want to. If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about the sport of wrestling, what would you change?
Well, in my perspective, I was villainized sometimes when the sport was attached to money. If people were to make money, and not even a lot of money, just to pay for the effort, there was a hard time for people to understand that or appreciate that. And I think we have to understand that things can't always be for free, right? People are dedicating their life, their entire life, to do something. They have to have the resources to invest in it and then give back to it. And that's the one thing, if I could, it's not technical, it's not a mentality, it's just it's a philosophy, I guess.
Frank, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And last thing I want to say,
Go ahead.
thank you. You know, a big part of what I did was marketing or getting word out or having a platform. And you, specifically you, have helped in that. And maybe you don't think that way, but I owe you the thank you too. I mean that.